Hi. Every time I hear this bio, I'm always like, who's that? Because if anyone had told me a couple of years ago that I, Folashade Adeyemo, will one day be leading a change management team in Nigeria's oldest indigenous bank, I would have said, you're joking. I'd have laughed so hard because that girl, that little girl who wanted first to become a veterinarian and then a gynecologist, she didn't want to think about anything else. She didn't see hope in anything else but becoming a doctor, wearing a fancy lab coat, and asking her patients, human or animal alike, so how are you doing today? But life, as you know, it doesn't always hand you neatly labeled paths. And so when I couldn't get into medicine and I had to settle for human anatomy, I tried to convince myself, saying, it still has something to do with medicine, the way we tell ourselves lies. But the truth was, I was so disappointed and I cried for days because it felt like life had skipped my turn. It felt like I had missed a train everyone else seemed to be on. And so even though I graduated with flying colors, I was still disappointed. But years later, I made a big move. I moved from Kaduna, the northern part of the country, to Lagos in the southwestern part of the country. And it was both terrifying and exciting. Terrifying because I only knew like 2.5 people, and of the 2.5 people, 1.5 of them are in this room. Exciting because I had a big job offer. I had a role as a trainee embryologist, but still it was big. Trainee embryologist in Nigeria's foremost fertility clinic. It was big, it was beautiful, and I remember my first day. I remember the sterile rooms, the quiet hum of the machines. I remember the fancy lab coats that I eventually got to wear. I remember the scrubs, everything that represented a new beginning for other people. And for 2 years, I poured myself into that role. I poured myself into the role. I had long hours, constant precision, quiet dedication. But in all of that science, there was a silence that was expanding inside of me. And on a random Monday, I quit. No new role, no clear plan. I do not advise. It sucked a lot. And I know that this screams utter recklessness to some people. I get that. But it mirrors a statistical trend by McKinsey in 2023 that showed that over 70% of people that they interviewed that made career pivot decisions made those decisions based on a search for meaningful work rather than compensation. Meaningful work rather than compensation. And even though I didn't have a language for it then, I was already stepping into a transition that would eventually define me. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is leave a place before you know where you're going next. So show of hands, has anybody, made a very rash decision that ended up paying for you? Oh, thank you. I thought I was going to be alone. You see, that decision, it led me to a chapter in my life that I never saw coming. I became an executive assistant. And that role felt like a step backwards. Because I got many people, many older aunties and lecturers from school coming to say, you could have just done medicine. You still had the opportunity to become a doctor. Why are you here? And my lecturer from school came up to say, that you could have become an associate lecturer. This is not a place for you. It really felt like a step backwards. But behind that desk, I learned things that no lab could have taught me. I learned to read people. I learned to influence without authority. I learned to manage egos. I learned to adapt when changes showed up overnight. I learned to hold chaos together until clarity came forth. I thought I was there to just manage people's schedules, but in truth, I was learning leadership myself. I was learning how organizations breathe and how they choke when communication fails. And what I didn't know then was that every step, everything that looks like a side road is typically a very intricate part of the design. You see, for a long time, I thought change was about processes and timelines and communication plans. But in reality, change, actual change that causes transformation, it doesn't come with a SWOT analysis. It's not seen in a PowerPoint. It happens in the people. And that change, it is very messy. It is very humbling. It is unpredictable, and it is very, very uncomfortable. But psychologists call this identity reconstruction, because you're not just adjusting to your circumstances, you're adjusting the story, you are rewriting the story that you're telling about yourself. And a Harvard study on organizational resilience proves this by letting us know that organizations that thrive in transformation, they have one thing in common: adaptability. It's not skill, it's not talent, it's adaptability. And behavioral neuroscientists prove this also by showing us through various research that our brains are actually wired for survival, not certainty. Your brain is wired to survive, not find moments of certainty. And so it means that every time you feel that discomfort in change, it's not a sign that you're failing. It's a biological signal of growth. Because confusion is not the enemy of clarity. Confusion is the pathway to it. And when you feel that discomfort, don't panic, don't rush to fix it. Just sit in it and ask yourself, what is this teaching me about myself? When I finally entered the world of change management, and for many people who don't know what change management is, because I get asked this question a lot, what do you do? I manage transitions. When I finally entered this world of change management as head change manager, still baffles me that I get to call myself that. I found out something very profound, that I had been living change before I started leading it. And that every detour, every pivot, it brought me here. The anatomy degree, the embryology lab, the executive assistant desk, they were all a training ground for this very moment. Because leading change is not about having all the answers, it's about holding space. It's about helping people sit in uncertainty until they find hope. It's about helping people find clarity in foggy seasons. It's about empathy. It's about patience. And maybe that's why this particular work feels like home to me, because I'm very familiar with life changing your script, but still finding purpose inside that pivot. And so, no, as you can see, I didn't become a vet. I obviously didn't become a gynecologist. But I became something. I became someone who helped people when life flips the script. And if there's anything that this journey of my life has taught me, and I hope that you live here with, is that change is not an interruption. It's an invitation. And sometimes that invitation comes as disappointment. It comes as a new opportunity, and sometimes it comes as confusion. But if you dare to stay open, if you dare to look at this transition, you see that within that transition, there's a message for you. And in that detour, there's a meaning. So, next time life attempts to flip the script on you, ask yourself one question. What is this change teaching me about who I am becoming? Because when we stop fighting change and we start partnering with it, we get to see something very important. That change helps you become. Change becomes you. Thank you.